The $6 million Breeders' Cup Classic is up next. And to talk about it, we bring back a very popular returning guest from NBC Sports, from the Beyer Speed Figure team. He's Randy Moss. Randy, how are things?
Hey, good. I guess it's better to be popular than unpopular. Thank you for that. But
what an interesting renewal of the Breeders' Cup Classic this is. We've got a clash of generations aspect that we don't always have every year. We've got foreign participation. I'm really excited to get your take on this race. Where's your eye drawn when you look at these past performances in this year's Breeders' Cup Classic?
Interesting is a good way to put it. Where are my eyes drawn? My eyes look like this. I can't. It's very difficult this year. Maybe is more than any other year in recent memory. To really be confident about any particular horse, and it's not because, like we talk about a lot during the Kentucky Derby, let's say, because there are so many horses with such good form to choose from. In this particular case, with this classic, yeah, you got a lot of horses, that have talent. Obviously, it's always the case. But it seems to me that there are more horses with legitimate question marks going into this race than is usually the case with the Classic.
Let's start with the top of the market. Archangelo comes here in the international markets anyway as a significant favorite. Do you think he deserves that place in the market over some of the older rivals?
Probably so. He's one of the few horses in there, I think, that don't have, the serious question marks that I was talking about. Now, there are different ways of looking at Archangelo. He wins the Belmont Stakes. Can you say that he was a better horse than Forte in the Belmont Stakes when Forte was coming off a 10-week layoff and still was linked behind him or whatever? Maybe not. But when he won the Travers, people kind of forget he didn't have the best trip in the world when he won the Travers. He was better in comparison to the horses behind him, I thought, than the margin at the end reflected. And I think Jenna Antonucci has done a fantastic job with him. In her words, tuning out all the white noise out there and just focusing on her horse and what she thinks is best for her horse and ignoring everything else. So I like the fact that the horse is coming in fresh off from the Travers with no race in between. Doesn't bother me at all. I think she knows what she's doing in that regard. And I do think that he is the horse to beat. But again, you're probably talking about the betting favorite, I suppose, although I think there's a lot of momentum for Arabian Knight. So I don't know how much value you're going to get from Archangelo.
Let's pivot right to Arabian Knight. He certainly has been a bit of a buzz horse heading into this. Do you think there's a chance we'll see him justify that buzz?
When you watch the Pacific Classic, I'm not going to try to overthink this. The immediate aftermath of the Pacific Classic, I'm like, I want Go Rocket Ride over Arabian Knight when they come back in the Breeders' Cup Classic, right? I mean, he controlled a very reasonable pace, which is his game in the Pacific Classic, and Go Rocket Ride was still coming at him hard toward the end of that 1.25 miles. And now, fast forward, he's going to have to deal, in all likelihood, with Saudi Crown during the first part of the Classic, who at the very least you figure will make him run a lot harder early than he had to run in the Pacific Classic. Now you got Bob Baffert, the horse is training fantastic, but all Baffert's horses train fantastic. Is he improved? Is he just, I don't know, but I can't, he's a bet against to me based on what appears to be a pretty tough pace scenario.
As a speed figure oriented player, I would imagine one of the horses that will be in your reckoning of the race is White Abarrio, coming off that huge number at Saratoga. I feel like he's been under the radar in a lot of discussion of the race. Here you have a tough older horse with that giant number laid out for this by a trainer who's won this race before. What of the chances of White Abarrio?
Look, Rick Dutrow, for all the controversy surrounding Rick Dutrow, is an amazing horseman. There was a reason why every time the late Bobby Frankel shipped a horse into a track where he wasn't stabled and Rick Dutrow was there, he would make a beeline and send his horses to Dutrow. He told me personally, Frankel did, that the guy is an amazing horseman. And I've, that just sort of echoed in my ears every time, I see Dutrow with a horse. And now look what he's done with White Abarrio. Now, he ran pretty well. He ran a better number in the Met Mile. And then, 110 Beyer speed figure in the Whitney. It wasn't a fluke. But what bothers me about White Abarrio, Dutrow's having to deal, apparently, the same thing with White Abarrio as he used to deal with Big Brown back in 2008. And that is a horse that's got bad feet. Mm-hmm. And he's already had 2 aborted workouts leading up to the Breeders' Cup Classic out at Santa Anita, in which he was not permitted to breeze because of foot issues. And, it's Dutrow. So maybe the horse trots out there and repeats that 110 Beyer speed figure. And if that's the case, he probably wins. But when things aren't going exactly 100% according to plan with a horse that hasn't run since early August, it bothers me.
Completely understandable. Here's a general question for you that pertains to a couple of runners in this spot. We saw what the Japanese contingent did out on the West Coast 2 years ago. We've got a couple of Japanese raiders appearing in this year's classic. As a speed figure guy, are there any hacks? Are there any shortcuts or ways you can estimate what kind of figures the likes of Ushba Tesoro and Dharma Sotogake are going to run?
You can. I don't know how much it's going to help you, but let's look at the Dubai World Cup day, okay? And we talked about this before the Kentucky Derby. Didn't end very well for me, at least. But Dharma Sotogake ran approximately 5 Beyer points faster than Ushba Tesoro did in the Dubai World Cup. Okay, I estimated, and it's just an estimation. That's why it's not printed in the form or anything, because we just estimate it at like a 106 for Dharma Sotogake and a 101 for Ushba Tesoro. So it was not one of your stronger Dubai World Cup races. So I think you got to keep that in mind when you're looking at Ushba Tesoro. When you look at Dharma Sotogake in the Kentucky Derby, he didn't get a trip. He was bothered at the start. He was much farther back than he needs to be. His jockey, Christophe Lemaire, who was my biggest concern about Dharma Sotogake going into the Kentucky Derby for all the success Lemaire has had, rushed him too much. He moved too early into, one of the faster paces in Kentucky Derby history. So the horse really had no chance the way the race developed. But what bothers me is he hasn't run since then, which he missed a prep, the same prep that Ushba Tesoro ran in and won. Which indicates that he's had some physical problems. And this, again, it's just not the way you want to come into a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic. Yeah. So, yes, the Japanese horses kicked ass the last time the Breeders' Cup was on the West Coast. And yes, I think you've got to give them extra consideration because of that. But I don't think Ushba Tesoro, in my opinion, fits as well, let's say, for the Breeders' Cup Classic as Songline might fit for the Breeders' Cup Mile.
I think you can make a much more straightforward case there. I think I'd be accused of a host fail if I didn't ask you about our Kentucky Derby winner, Mage, making his return to the races. Do you think we're going to see more like the Mage that ran under the Twin Spires in May, or more like the Mage that toiled down the street here in Saratoga in the Travers?
Good question. Good question. And I say this not knowing, not being around the horse and not seeing him train up close and personal before the Derby and now at the Kentucky Training Center, so I don't have any inside information about, how he's training now vis-a-vis how he trained going into the Derby. I do know this, at least I have an opinion on this. As much as I like Flavien Prat as a jockey, and I think he's one of the very best jockeys in the country, I hated the way he rode Mage in the Travers Stakes. And I don't know that can be the complete explanation for a horse who runs last and has beaten 15 lengths. But he broke sharply. He was going to be up close to a reasonable pace, closer than usual, because he didn't usually break that well. If you remember, he had a habit of breaking very slowly in his races. Travers, he broke very well. And then Flavien literally, and he was keyed up, right? He was a little bit aggressive early. And Pratt fought him and broke his jaw to drag him back in the pack. And I think he just took all the fight out of the horse. He took all the run out of the horse. I don't think, I hated that ride. So I'm going to give him an excuse for the Travers and expect him to bounce back. So I think he will come back to where he was in the Haskell and before that for the Kentucky Derby. The Preakness, again, he's coming back in 2 weeks. What we've seen recently is that the horses that come back in 2 weeks that run in the Preakness are at a disadvantage to horses that come in fresh. So I'll give him a little bit of slack for what seemed to be a bit of a duller performance in the Preakness. And then if you remember in the Haskell, the ownership was very straightforward. They were very transparent about the fact that he was going to be short. He was going to be 80%, 85%, 90%, wasn't going to be 100%. And they were going to use the Haskell as a prep to get him ready for the Travers. And their quote to me personally was, if we can run second in the Haskell, it's as good as winning as far as we're concerned. And that's what happened. So I expect Mage to run pretty well.
Yeah, maybe an interesting long shot. I mean, they talk about it. Now, it's hard for a Derby winner at post time to be under the radar, but certainly from where we sit here a few days out, that is the case. Any others in this field you feel like we should get a shout out to on this show at least? I mean, it's a deep and competitive field, even beyond the ones we've talked about.
Yeah. When you talk about all these horses with question marks, right? Mage comes off a last place finish in the Travers. White Abarrio's got the feet issues. Pace Scenario doesn't set up very well for Arabian Knight. The one of the horses, like Archangelo, who's very consistent, always runs his race, usually not good enough, but who knows? It'd be Zanda. He beat a very weak field last time. He beat him like he was supposed to beat him. He was second to White Abarrio and wasn't even basically in the same area code in the finish of the Whitney. But for exotics, he's the kind of horse that you can count on. That's almost always coming with his race. And if you want another horse to throw into exotics, that's a real sleeper here. And we're talking probably 40-1. And his name escapes me right now real quick. I'm having
got it all in front of me.
I'm having a brain meltdown here. I can't believe I can't remember this horse's name because I've been talking about him. Senor Buscador. This is a horse that has been, I'll just say it, he's been ridden questionably in a lot of his races. And by that, I mean, and this absolutely drives Jerry Bailey crazy. Okay. When you have a horse who's at the back of the pack and he's by himself at the back of the pack, he's got the entire racetrack to choose from, and the rider keeps him 4 wide all the way around the first turn. It's as if they think that geometry doesn't matter if it's not the second turn or if there's no other horses around them. They go, oh, look, I've got the track to myself. I can be anywhere I want. It doesn't matter. It does matter. And then the horse closes and gets beat a length and a half or 2 lengths or something, and he gives away 2 lengths on the first turn. Last time he was ridden, I thought much better. He saved a lot more ground than he had before, but he was running on a very speed favoring sloppy racetrack, and it probably didn't suit his running style, which is obviously a come from the clouds kind of running style. He should get pace. He'll be running at the end. 1.25 miles great for him, I think. And I would not be surprised at all to see him, come flying down the middle of the racetrack and get up for third at a big price, maybe even second. Who knows?
A bottom up try or super key, something along those lines. Maybe.
Swing for the fences. Why not?
Well, Randy, we're not gonna hold your feet to the fire for selections. We're gonna do that next week when we have you on with Jerry Bailey. But this was a great overview of what promises to be a fantastic running of the Breeders' Cup Classic. Thanks for your time today.
Nice to see you, Pete.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want more great content, choose one of the videos you see on screen now, or go to our website, inthemoneypodcast.com. And for even more, check out inthemoneypodcast.com/plus.